Each member of the House of Representatives can employ 18 staff people in both their district offices back at home as well as their Washington office. So by and large, you have about 6 to 8 people working in their personal office here in Washington. Now, when you think about the whole range of issues that Congress deals with, those get sorted out among the staff, and somebody ends up with postal on their plate, but they have lots of other issues that they are also following. So they become an expert in those areas that are on their plate. This is relatively new in this Congress, so you have the responsibility to help to educate them, and that's why we spent an special amount of time in the issues brief that you have inside the front binder of your front pocket of your binder. We paid particular attention to the very first page, 5 things you ought to know about the Postal Service. If you were to do a survey of the 535 lawmakers, that is 435 members of the House and 100 in the Senate, I would wager that at least a third of them did not know point number 1, that no taxpayer dollars support the Postal Service. And that is critically important given the heightened attention on fiscal solvency of our nation and the use of taxpayer dollars and the impact that the Tea Party has had. So when you go into the offices, and we're going to be talking more about how a congressional visit should occur and the best things to say during that visit this afternoon, our folks from the Florida delegation are going to role play a congressional visit for us. And we're going to watch and observe that. And you'll see at the very beginning, they spend a little bit of time talking about the basics of how the Postal Service works and what it means for its impact back home. Incredibly important. So congressional staff, do not disregard the fact that although the lawmaker isn't here this week in most cases, still meeting with their staff is incredibly important, because when a vote comes up on the floor, they will be involved in 2 ways. They will, A, be advising them about the guts of the issue, and secondly, they will be urging them to take a position, either A, yay or nay. That'll be at times in accord with what their party is recommending as well. But they really rely, a lawmaker, whether it's a House member or Senate, rely upon their staffer for that judgment. There are just too many issues that they have to vote on. Otherwise, they can't be experts on that. Now, one more thing about staff. There are 2 kinds of congressional staff. There are the staff that work for the lawmaker in their own personal office. But secondly, there are staff that work for committees of the Congress. And if we turn to your congressional directory that you have there in your binder, this is your roadmap for the Hill. You'll see at the back, after we go through the listings there of each of the states and their members of their delegations, you'll see starting at page 66, the committee that oversees the Postal Service. That's the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. It has within its jurisdiction responsibility for the Postal Service and pretty much the entirety of government operations in terms of the administration of government falls under this committee. HISGAC, we refer to it as, Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. You see 9 Democrats, 8 Republicans that reflect the very narrow balance of power that the Democrats have in the Senate. That's true of all of the Senate committees in terms of that proportionality. We'll talk a little bit more about the makeup of that committee in just a moment. The Postmaster General is on his way here, so I'm going to be wrapping this up, and then we'll return to the next point in just a moment. But to finish up here on this, with regard to committees, there are staff that work for the committee, and then secondly, there are staff that work for the lawmakers directly. The counterpart to the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee in the House is the committee that you find on page 82. If you turn to page 82 of the directory, there you see we've got the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. That's the committee in the House of Representatives that oversees the Postal Service. Now, we'll talk a little bit about both of those committees and the role that they play after the break. And what we're going to do this morning is, as the Postmaster General arrives, we'll hear his address and welcome him. And then we'll take a break after he's wrapped up, and then we'll come back, and then we'll dig into the nuts and bolts of our issues agenda. One quick thing to just talk a little bit about before the Postmaster General arrives is where your meetings will be held on the Hill. You have this map in your binder. I ask you to turn to that. It's at page 63 of the binder. There are 6 congressional office buildings. All of your meetings will be in one or more of those 6 buildings. 3 are on the House side, and 3 are on the Senate side. Right in the middle there is the Capitol. And then north of the Capitol, you can see there is the Senate side, where you have the Russell Senate Office Building, which is the oldest, and I think the most distinguished of the 3 Senate office buildings. And then next door to that is Dirksen, and then next door to that is Hart. Dirksen and Hart are connected above ground. Russell and Dirksen are connected below ground. So it's possible for you to go through the maze of corridors without going outside. The weather tomorrow is supposed to be drier, much drier than today, fortunately. But if in the event you want to stay out of the weather, you can navigate your way between those 3 buildings without going outside. If you move across the Hill to the House side, you can see that we've got 3 office buildings there as well. From left to right, you've got the Rayburn House Office Building, which is the largest of the 3. It's the newest of them. Next door to that is Longworth, and then next door is Cannon. Those 3 buildings are also interconnected through a series of tunnels under the ground. You can go from one building to the other without going outside. You don't have to pass through security to be able to do that. It used to be that you could even go through the Capitol and go from one side of the Hill, the Senate side, to the House side by going through a maze of tunnels that connected those 2 sides of the Hill. The tunnels still exist today, but unfortunately, security considerations prevent, unless you have a special clearance, to be able to use the subway system that they have underneath there, the trolley cars that rapidly move senators from the Senate office buildings to the Capitol. Tomorrow morning, we'll be having on the Hill a very special program, hearing from several House lawmakers about postal issues, and that will occur in a new complex called the Capitol Visitors Center. We're really delighted that we were able to arrange for the use of the auditorium in the Capitol Visitors Center. You'll recall the many years, for those of you who have been here year after year, you'll recall all the construction that had been going on there and all the fences that were up and prevented easy travel back and forth from one side to the other. If you look at the map there, on the right, to the right of the U.S. Capitol, you see a green space there with two circles. Underneath that entirety of space right there lies the Capitol Visitors Center. It's an impressive complex. And in the event, if the Capitol were ever to be unavailable for whatever national emergency reasons, and Congress were still in Washington, the Capitol Visitors Center and its auditorium, where you'll be meeting, where we'll be meeting tomorrow morning, is equipped for Congress to be able to meet in that very chamber. So that's kind of neat that we'll be doing our program tomorrow, hearing from House members there in the Capitol Visitors Center, there in that special space. Talked a little bit about the degree to which this Congress is new. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives. 94 of them, 94, gathered there on the steps of the Capitol, smiling faces. 94 of them are newly elected. That is nearly 1/4 of all members of the House of Representatives that are brand new to their jobs. Many of them got elected on promises to cut government spending, to make change occur in Washington. They are now undergoing the equivalent of the water tank at a carnival in terms of getting dropped in to the water. The Republicans had for their members 2 weeks ago what they called budget camp, where they tried over the course of 3 days to inform and train their folks in understanding this huge, huge thing called the federal budget, how it works, and how spending of it can be changed, and why and how it's more difficult and even politically risky to make changes in some areas. We'll be talking more about that as we dig into the nuts and bolts of our issues agenda. But 94 freshmen in the House. Over in the Senate, not quite as many new members, but still a considerable number, 13. When you keep in mind that a member of the Senate has a term for how many years? 6. And how many get elected each year? 1/3. 1/3. So of 33, 13 new, and keep in mind we had retirements among some of them. So pretty considerable change in offices there as well. The whole point, it's up to you to educate these new folks on the Postal Service and our agenda. The change in the House was more remarkable than the change in the Senate. Why? Because it shifted political control. It moved from the Democrats to the Republicans. And there you have the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi turning over the gavel to the new Speaker of the House, John Boehner.